The PADI Dive Master course develops your abilities in many areas to shape you into an emerging dive professional. You'll also learn about managing your risk as a pro and expanding your business skills within the dive industry. Of all of these, this video focuses primarily on 3 areas: supervising certified divers, assisting with student divers in training, and the PADI programs you can conduct as a PADI Dive Master. As you learn, think about things you need to consider and anticipate during each diving situation, and how your judgment affects diving decisions. By developing the ability to think this way, you'll be able to function effectively as a dive master in virtually any situation. Let's start by asking what makes someone a PADI Dive Master. Divers see different things: a guide, a dive supervisor, a wildlife expert, an instructional assistant, an emergency manager, and so on. These are clearly parts of being a dive master. But you can sum it up by saying a dive master has 2 broad characteristics: professionalism and role model behavior. What is professionalism? It's a trait made up of many other traits that mark you as a professional. In diving, professionalism includes having expert water, rescue, management, and leadership skills. It includes having good judgment, reflected by following safe diving practices, following PADI standards, and making conservative decisions about conditions or situations that may affect safety. Professionalism means having good interpersonal skills. People dive for fun, and they expect you to be someone who is open, positive, and enjoyable to interact with. This includes dressing and acting like a professional. Like it or not, your clothes and your dive equipment make a statement about you. Appropriate dress and behavior vary with location and culture, but the expectation is universal. A role model is someone whom others want to pattern their behaviors after. A good role model displays desired behaviors. As a PADI Dive Master, this means things like having excellent dive skills, being environmentally responsible, following safe diving practices, using maintained, up-to-date dive gear, and being fit. Keeping up with dive trends, information, and practices, demonstrating good customer service and acting on your dive operations business needs, and doing what you advise other divers to do to safely dive is part of being a good role model. Role model behavior, good or poor, can affect other divers. Good behaviors give divers a pattern to follow for responsible dive practices and habits. They help student divers, who often learn from what they see as well as from what they're told. Consistency between what the instructor says and what you do reinforces their learning. Good role modeling also gives you credibility and encourages divers to follow your lead. Poor role modeling is the opposite. It sets a bad example that may cause some people to question whether they need to follow proper diving practices. Coupled with uncaring or demeaning actions, poor role modeling can cause divers to question you and your credibility. In considering professionalism and role model behavior, it's worth remembering that certified divers are qualified to dive independently. But they often want to dive with a dive master because they expect you to know where the best diving is, to handle many of the logistics, to recommend appropriate techniques, and to help them compare their experience and skill levels with the conditions. They also know that you can help with minor or major problems and provide information that helps them improve their safety and have more fun. In short, professional role model dive masters make diving a better experience. As a PADI Dive Master, you are a PADI member, part of the world's largest diver training organization. Your membership in PADI comes with benefits and with responsibilities. Benefits of PADI membership come from the support you get from the international PADI offices. The offices develop, maintain, and promote the world's most popular diver training programs, and provide you with consultation in implementing these programs. As a PADI Dive Master, you receive pro-level communications including the Undersea Journal, training bulletins, newsletters, industry alerts, and access to the pros site at padi.com. PADI offices help you access affordable professional liability insurances and provide numerous business benefits for dive operations. Your credential as a PADI Dive Master qualifies you to lead certified divers and assist PADI instructors. It allows you to conduct some PADI programs independently, and it's a required step toward becoming a PADI open water scuba instructor yourself. Becoming a PADI member has responsibilities, beginning with a commitment to adhere to the code of practice and the standards relating to your duties as a PADI Dive Master. The code of practice lists specifics related to prioritizing safety, interacting with divers and students, your relationship with other PADI members and the dive industry in general, and common honesty and conduct. Your instructor will review these with you in the PADI Instructor Manual. To continue as a PADI Dive Master, you're also responsible for renewing your PADI membership annually and keeping your PADI office up to date with your current contact information. Your office will send you annual renewals, and you can sign up for automatic renewal. But if you fail to renew, you lose your membership benefits. Because becoming a PADI Dive Master is an important step towards becoming a dive professional, your relationship with your instructor will be more than a student-teacher interaction. Think of your instructor as a mentor, a coach, guide, confidant, and advisor who is raising you up as an assistant and colleague. Your instructor will explain judgment calls and the thinking behind decisions and how your decisions may affect others. Always ask why and how about decisions and thinking. Explaining these is the heart of a mentor-protege relationship. As a PADI Dive Master, you're expected to be a dive expert, someone who is capable of solving relatively complex problems and providing answers within a field. One reason experts solve problems more effectively than non-experts is they have a broad knowledge base to draw upon. Therefore, you want a considerable dive theory base and experience to draw upon to solve problems and provide answers to diver questions. You'll start developing these as part of this course, but it never ends. You should be seeking more knowledge and experience throughout your diving career. A dive reference library is part of developing and continuing your expertise. It gives you a place to look up information, refresh what you've learned, and study changes. Your library naturally starts with PADI manuals and videos, but let it grow to include science, nature, maps, journals, websites, podcasts, magazines, and other references about wrecks, aquatic life, physiology, equipment, navigation, and dive travel. When available, opt for e-media, which are easy to store, easy to take with you, and easy to search electronically. Your expertise also grows through training, particularly in PADI specialty courses, and, if tech diving interests you, in the PADI Tech Rec program. Additional training broadens your dive opportunities and contributes to your experience. The more you know, the more you have to draw upon when leading divers. But don't limit your thinking to diving. Training in boat handling, retail sales, equipment servicing, engine or compressor mechanics, and the like are all skills that dive masters frequently draw upon. They're also skills that make you more valuable to potential employers. Qualifying as a Discover Scuba Diving Leader allows you to introduce divers to the thrill of diving and encourage them to become certified divers. In many areas, but especially in resort environments, the most common dive master responsibility is supervising certified divers. Certified divers are qualified to plan their own dives and dive independently. You provide broad planning assistance by briefing divers about the site, conditions and recommended techniques, potential hazards, local conservation laws and practices, and other factors. What you include in your briefing will be partly based on your evaluation of conditions and on what you know about the divers based on their qualifications, what they tell you, and general observation. You also provide planning assistance by being reasonably prepared for foreseeable emergencies. Depending, of course, upon the approach used by the resort or dive boat, dive masters are not normally responsible for planning individual dives for certified divers. This is important. Divers bear the consequences of a dive plan, so they have to accept responsibility for it. You can't know their individual training, experience, and comfort as well as they do, so they have to set their own limits. Conditions can change during a dive, so they have to be prepared to adapt. And you can't control what divers do, so they're responsible for their own actions. Typically, your job is to assist with information, such as with an adequate briefing, and to encourage responsible actions. An effective way to plan a dive is to think through the dive. Think about everything you need to do, making a list as you go. Start with pre-dive preparation, like checking the weather and tides. Next, consider what needs to go to the boat or dive site. Imagine greeting the divers as they arrive and what you'll tell them to help get the day off to a good start for them. Think about the flow of activity as the divers get in and out of the water and what they'll want to do between dives, like having something to eat or drink. Think about post-dive activities, like logging them out of the water. Think about reasonably foreseeable problems that can come up and have responses ready. As you do all this, think about what information the divers may want for planning their dive, so you can be prepared to provide it. As a diver, you probably already do this. You'll learn to expand what you consider and plan for as you go through the PADI Dive Master course. Evaluating dive conditions is important for planning and something you already do as a diver. When evaluating, determining acceptable conditions depends, in part, on skill and experience. A shore entry through mild surf may be routine for some divers, but new and challenging for others. Your role is to provide a realistic idea of what the conditions are so divers can decide whether they're personally comfortable with them. Explaining your observations and conclusions helps them plan and helps them grow as divers. Weather, tides, and currents interact and affect conditions. You get weather and tide information online from charts, newspapers, marine radio, and other sources. But your observations are important because, with experience, you'll become knowledgeable about how weather and tides affect diving. You also need to learn to recognize when currents are present and how they may affect a dive. Determining the visibility requires a good vantage point, and even then it's not always easy, though again, experience helps. Weather, rain, runoff, waves, plankton blooms, bottom composition, and other factors influence visibility. For planning dives in remote areas, there are 3 aspects to consider. First, prepare and plan for more extensive logistics: cylinder fills, food, sleeping arrangements, and so on. Second, you may be a long way from help, so plan for several hours of medical supplies should they be needed. Third, think in terms of self-sufficiency. Have tools and spare parts for dive gear, but also for the boat engine plus anything else crucial. The primary purpose of accounting procedures is, obviously, to track divers in and out of the water. How you'll do this is part of dive planning. Normally, you list diver names in buddy teams on the PADI dive roster slate and check that everyone's on it before diving starts. This can be a formal roll call, or simply checking visually if the group is small enough. You normally note the time divers get in and when they get out, followed by a visual check of everyone before leaving the site. Be sure you see everyone personally. Don't allow divers to answer for each other because this has caused mistakes. For very large groups, you may consider using a tag system in addition to your roll call. People vary in their experience, abilities, and interests. As a dive master, you need to be able to adapt to address what they want and need when they dive. Novice divers generally appreciate more advice and reminders, but seasoned divers typically don't need or want as much. Individuals may also have different challenges to deal with. These may include physical challenges, which call for adaptive techniques before, during, and after the dive. Learning challenges, which can affect how student divers learn and remember things, may require some accommodation as well. Regardless, your job is to apply creativity and solution thinking to help individuals overcome their challenges and enjoy diving within the limits of their abilities. Diving involves travel, so another way people differ is in their cultural backgrounds. As a dive leader, it's important to show cultural sensitivity for those you supervise and for those around you when you lead dive travel. Divers also differ in how responsible they are. Although you can role model responsible diving, ultimately divers are responsible for their own choices and actions. Watch for individuals who put themselves and others at risk with irresponsible behaviors. Responsible divers plan dives within their and their buddies' training and experience limits. They use the equipment that's generally accepted as required for a dive, and they take care of their gear, inspecting it before diving. They avoid contacting sensitive aquatic life and demonstrate respect for the environment. They check their SPGs and computers frequently and end their dives well within air and no decompression limits. The best way to encourage responsible behaviors is to role model them by adhering to them yourself. It also helps to remind divers of responsible dive practices, and making them convenient also encourages responsible choices. For example, a bar, weighted line, or cylinder hanging at 5 meters 15 feet reminds divers to make safety stops, and also makes them easier. And acknowledging safe diving practices and environmental sensitivity encourages divers to adopt them. It takes practice and experience, but you'll get a feel for divers' experience levels, attitudes, and stress just by watching them. For instance, a diver with all rental gear is likely to be either a novice or someone who dives infrequently. A person whose gear is all older and perhaps somewhat obsolete is likely to be someone returning to diving and who's a bit rusty. And someone who omits required standard gear, like a BCD, may have responsibility issues. A diver who is uncharacteristically quiet, irritable, or talkative may have some anxiety about the dive, and someone who is pale and withdrawn may be ill. A diver whose buddy sets up everything may be inexperienced or overly dependent. When in doubt, the surest way to learn about experience, training, and stress is to check dive logs and certifications and to simply ask divers how they feel. If you notice a diver experiencing possible pre-dive stress, you can try to help the person deal with it. As you learned in the PADI Rescue Diver course, mental stress is a perceived threat, major or minor, that results from concerns about the ability to make a dive safely, or from physical stress, such as heat exhaustion or seasickness. Physical stress can add to mental stress. Perceptual narrowing, in which someone focuses attention on something to the exclusion of all else, is also a sign of stress. You may see signs, or an anxious diver may express concerns to a buddy or you. Regardless, it's best to deal with stress before the dive if possible. If you think a diver has pre-dive stress, it's usually simplest to privately ask in a caring manner. Often, the cause is obvious, but sometimes it's not and the diver isn't forthcoming. In that case, use your best professional judgment as to the likely cause. There are 2 ways to eliminate stress. Either remove the stressor, like cooling an overheated diver, or change the diver's perceptions so that he no longer perceives a threat. For example, you may help a diver stressed over getting lost by reviewing compass use and showing him an easy way to navigate the site. If one or more divers appear they're not up for the dive, it helps to remind everyone that not only is it okay not to dive, but that deciding not to dive is often the mark of a mature, responsible diver.